Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're all having a great and wonderful day. Well, guys, it seems that the demise of the NFA is doomed because Trump has finally made that bill to where you can't have silencers, where you can have tax of silencers and short barrel rifles, and we'll be going over through that a lot today because this is kind of a big deal and really good for the Second Amendment, which I'm a huge advocate for. And this is something that should probably be addressed. So what we have here is that gun rights groups welcome the demise of illogical and constitutionally dubious federal firearms taxes. Says the one big beautiful bill which President Donald Trump signed into law last week reduces the federal tax on transfers of firearms, sound suppressors, short barrel rifles, and short barrel shotguns from $200 to zero. That tax, originally imposed by the National Firearms Act of 1934, was meant to be prohibitive, amounting to about $4,800 in current dollars. Although inflation dramatically reduced the burden of the tax, gun rights groups welcome its elimination as a blow against the first national gun control law, the history of which illustrates the logical and constitutional flaws of federal firearm regulation. The NFA amendments are the biggest blow to the National Firearms Act since its passage nearly a century ago, the National Rifle Association, the Firearms Policy Coalition. The Second Amendment Foundation and the American Suppressor Association said in the joint statement, eliminating the excise tax on these NFA items, they added removes the heavy burden of unconstitutional tax from the backs of hardworking Americans and represents a critical step towards our ultimate goal of dismantling the NFA once and for all. I agree. I think the NFA has been absolutely an atrocious organization, and they're actually anti-Second Amendment. They're not pro-Second Amendment. They more along the lines of try to remove people's rights with having weapons and guns and stuff along those lines. And I really can't stand organizations like that. We should all be able to have the right to defend ourselves and to protect ourselves from evil people. And the NFA has made it that very, very hard to do for people that want to protect themselves. It says Congress approved the NFA largely in response to a dramatic rise in the homicide rate, which peaked in 1933, the year that the NFA or National Alcohol Prohibition was repealed. There was no mere coincidence. The economist Milton Friedman argued in 1991, since prohibition had created a new black market in which there was no peaceful way to resolve disputes, leading to shocking acts of violence such as the 1929 St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Legislators were also alarmed by nationally notorious criminals such as the bank robber John Dillinger, whose names came up repeatedly during hearings on the NFA in the spring of 1934. Since machine guns figured prominently in both kinds of violence, it is not surprising that they were the NFA's main target. But the original version of this bill went much further, imposing taxes and registration requirements on pistols and revolvers, as well as machine guns. See how this is what we have here, to where they're just not going off of, machine guns, but they're doing all their small handguns, because a lot of handguns exceed the actual barrel length. This makes it to where, you can go buy guns now for $200 cheaper because of all the good stuff. Because of, pretty much $200 cheaper because you don't have to worry about the tax. It says, and to prevent evasion of the de facto handgun ban, they also aim to restrict rifles and shotguns with barrels shorter than 18 inches. So that's insane here, right? Because again, most shotguns are 18 to 36 in length. The logic of the latter provision was hard to follow after handguns were dropped from the bill in response to objections that including them would tolerably impinge on the constitutional right to armed self-defense. Nearly a century later, handguns are still overwhelmingly favored by armed criminals, but they are also, as the Supreme Court put in the landmark Second Amendment case, the District of Columbia v. Hiller, the quintessential self-defense weapon, rifles and shotguns of any sort, by contrast, rarely figure in homicides. But until last week, short-barrel versions were still subject to the same tax as machine guns. The tax on machine guns remains in place, reinforced by a ban on civilian ownership of machine guns produced after 1986. But the One Big Beautiful Bill Act implicitly recognizes that putting short barrel rifles and shotguns in the same category never made much sense. No, because again, shotguns are just automatically longer than most guns in general, maybe outside of rifles in general. The legislators who supported the NFA also perceived suppressors, which they misleadingly called silencers, as inherently nefarious. As recent J.D. Tuso notes, the reputation was doubly undeserved. Contrary to the oppression led by many crime and spy dramas, even suppressed gunfire is still quite loud. According to one summary of test results, most civilian accessible firearms emit sounds ranging from 140 to 175 decibels. So-called silencers only marginally suppress a gun blast, reducing the noise level to between 120 and 150 decibels. And we're going to find out later in this video, right, that the NFA or the NRA were using silencers as a weapon to try to go after guns to increase the length or whatever, and make you not be able to have them. That's what the NRA was doing, and there's a lot of crazy stuff here. Now I'm going to read this full article, but we need to go to this here because there's some other issues that is pertaining to this situation here, right? So Trump's big beautiful bill sparks gun group lawsuit within hours. Several gun rights groups filed a lawsuit to dismantle what is left of the NRA or the NFA shortly after U.S. President Donald Trump signed his package of tax breaks and spending cuts into the law Friday. The legislation reduced the NFA's excise tax on suppressors, short-barrel rifles, and short-barrel shotguns, and any other weapons to $0. Gun owners, GOA, and other plaintiffs argue in the lawsuit, which they have dubbed the One Beautiful lawsuit, that the Supreme Court upheld, and the FAA has a tax statute, and the unconstitutional justification for no longer applies once the tax is eliminated. Newsweek has contacted the Department of Justice, etc., the DOJ, and all that stuff. So the context is the National Firearms Act was enacted in 1934 to regulate firearms considered the most dangerous and crack down on gangland crime in the Prohibition era. The law has imposed a $200 tax on machine guns and shotguns and rifles with barrels shorter than 18 inches, and also required to the federal registration of these types of firearms. Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act eliminates the $200 fee that gun owners are charged with purchasing silencers and short-barreled rifles, but it remains in effect for machine guns and explosive devices. Because, again, machine guns, which they call fully automatic weapons or whatever you want to call them, an assault weapon is not really the correct term of this, but you can't really get machine guns very easily in the U.S. You can get AKs, you can get these guns, but you have to have a special license, and majority of Americans don't even have this license in the first place, and most of the things to the 1984 Act, you can't really purchase any weapon below that year in the first place. So you can't have access to machine guns, and having an access to machine gun is actually hugely against the law. But what the thing is that the NRA, these laws or these taxes was affecting, as we could already tell you, shotguns, pistols, semi-automatic guns, like stuff like that have nothing to do with fully automatic weapons, or we would call machine guns. So that's the problem here. The group said congressional Republicans had allowed an unelected bureaucrat to block the provision. GOA added that Congress ultimately settled for reducing the NFA's $200 excise tax to $0 on suppressors, short-barrel rifles, short-barrel shotguns, and any other weapons taking up GOA's legal challenge. GOA also said it has long argued that the NFA's registration mandates violate the Second Amendment and are unconstitutional overreach of federal power. I would 100% agree with that. The authors of the NFA left no doubt that the NFA was an exercise of the taxing power, and the Supreme Court upheld on that basis, says a lawsuit which was filed in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Texas. But the NFA no longer imposes any tax on the vast majority of firearms it purports to regulate. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which Congress and the President enacted on July 4, 2025, zeroes of manufacture and transfer tax on nearly all NFA-regulated firearms. That means on the constitutional foundation on which the NFA test has dissolved, and the NFA cannot be upheld under any other Article 1 power. With respect to the untaxed firearms, the act is now unconstitutional, which means the NRA is pretty much dissolved. That one reason why they were in effect and in power is now gone. So they have to dissolve at this point. It's done. It's over for this organization. Eric Pratt, senior vice president of GOA, said in a statement, "This is a once in a generation opportunity to dismantle one of the most abusive federal gun control laws on the books. With a tax struck down by Congress, the rest of the NFA is standing on air. We're ready to take this fight to the courts and finally end the federal irregularity once and for all." Sam Parrott said in a statement on behalf of the board for GOF, It says the Supreme Court has made clear that the NFA survives only as a tax law. Once the president signs this bill and the tax disappears, the registry becomes unconstitutional relic. GOF is prepared to go to court and challenge every remaining provision that violates the Second Amendment. The NRA is cooked because, again, there is nothing that the NRA has. If this was all due to tax law, the NRA can't rightfully exist, and then therefore you are violating the Second Amendment in this way. It says, again, we have this here. Representative Mike Thompson, a Democrat and chairman of the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force, wrote on X, formerly Twitter on X, says congressional Republicans are giving a handout to the gun lobby by eliminating the $200 tax on silencers and easily concealable short barrel rifles and short barrel guns. We regulated silencers and these guns for 90 plus years for a reason, to keep people safe. It doesn't keep people safe, though. It really doesn't. It does absolutely nothing. Because it doesn't like, these guns are quite literally, you can still get them, and it doesn't change any difference on how people receive these weapons. Because machine guns, there's a certain criteria for machine guns, right? Machine guns are going to be fully automatic weapons. You can pull the trigger and have guns automatically spray immediately. You can't access those in the United States. So these guys are flat out lying here. I mean, you can access them, but but the problem is that every other gun has a barrel length of this size. Says Emma Brown, the executive director of Giffords, an organization focused on preventing gun violence, said in a statement, almost 100 years our president has kept silencers and short barrel firearms out of easy reach for criminals. But with this bill, Republicans are laying the groundwork to gut safeguards that stop criminals from getting these deadly weapons. This vote is proof that the law and old rhetoric Donald Trump has pushed for years single rings hollow. In siding with gun industry CEOs, he has handled criminals a win, and the communities will suffer the deadly consequences. They won't, because criminals will just get the guns anyways. There was a shooting here in Sacramento, not too far away from here. And it was pretty much in downtown. And what essentially happened was this guy had a tool, or I don't know what you call it, called a switch. This made the pistol that he had fully automatic. What ended up happening was we ended up finding out this guy was a current felon, and he still had the firearm anyway. And on top of that, you can't have this a fully automatic weapon to begin with. So that means that he got this weapon, made it fully automatic, even though it was against the law to do so. So it's not going to prevent criminals from getting these weapons. It won't stop them. You're going to have criminals getting them or getting them regardless of the situation. So it doesn't help protect people. It really doesn't. The lawsuit asked the court to declare that the NFA's registration and transfer requirements pertaining to untaxed firearms exceed Congress's undeniable powers and block the defendants from implementing, enforcing, and otherwise acting under the authority of the NFA with respect to untaxed firearms. Yeah, so again, the NFA is just a jerk organization. And what we have here with these shotguns. So shotgun barrel lengths typically range from 18 to 36 inches, with popular lengths varying based on the intended use. Shorter barrels, 18 inches to 20 inches, are favored for maneuverability and tactical situations in tight spaces, while longer barrels, 28 to 34 inches, are often preferred for hunting and sporting clays due to improved swing and accuracy. So again, when we see stuff like this, is that like you get a tax on these weapons that are obviously way longer than what it is. So it's insane. And then you have this here. A short barrel rifle is with a barrel length less than 16 inches and an overall length of 26 inches. So that being said, that every gun known to man is going to exceed this. Every gun. And then you have this here where a gun silencer is called a suppressor or sound moderator. While silencer is the more widely known term for a suppressor, is generally considered the more tactically accurate term within the firearm terms community. So what you're going to do is that what we need to have is have the word silencer for firearms not be used anymore. We need to have the word suppressor or sound moderator be used more accurately, so that way the NRA cannot be doing this. And the silencers don't hurt anything. Like, they don't silence the gun, they don't do anything, and they just slowly you make the gun quieter, but it doesn't nullify or silence the gun at all. And even if you had a silencer on, that doesn't mean bloody anything, because it doesn't make the gun any more dangerous than it is than when you have it on. Plain and simple. If anything, it protects the ears of people because some guns are very, very loud. So having a silencer on a gun is not a big deal because it protects your ears, protects your ears from being ruptured. Because there's guns that are so loud that you actually have to have a silencer or have earplugs in order to shoot them because they're just too loud. So again, silencers are not a big deal. Like, there's not an issue with them. They don't cause issues. And this is what we have in this country, to where the NRA is just trying to ban guns like this and make you pay extra money just because of the fact that, to protect people, even though it doesn't protect anybody. I don't like the NRA. I'm glad that they're collapsing and all things are going well here. I love it. And everybody should too. And it is the collapse of the NRA as we see it, and that's all we can be happy for. All right, guys, that's it for the video. Like, subscribe, share. As always, take care, my friends.